All right, welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. This is Bilal Zaidi, and we've got the boys in the house. Jack Butcher with his merch drippy as hell on his head, and we got Trung Phan, lead writer at The Hustle, who's also got his own version of drippy merch on his head. He's got an amazing new headset that we've been talking about since last week.
Our boy Packy has the same thing, man. Everybody's on. Everybody knows what's up.
You're setting
Your
the
hands
trend.
are free. Your hands are free, bro. Look at this. Yo, dude, it's shit. I'll be honest with you, man. I like
a new man.
Dude, it's just so stiff before, like with the mic. You're just like, oh, like fucking, like just do whatever I fucking want, man.
I know.
It's amazing.
You might just stand up again. You might do the jackass thing for episode 0. All right, so let's let people know what we're talking about today, because we've got some heavy edge of the internet stuff to kick us off. We're going to be talking about the future of NFTs, what it represents. We're going to talk about the power of memes and the meme API, and a little update on the Toad life and what CCO licensing could mean for crypto, and potentially public domain brands as well. So a whole section on that. And then we've got Fun Fact Fan is back. And we've got some chatter around SBF and FTX.
Sam Bankman-Fried, 29 years old, sitting on 23 billion.
Yeah, it's in the Drake lyric, exactly.
Yeah, bro.
So let's just kick it off. Look, if you're in the Telegram group and you've been following along, there was this amazing thread that was posted by, what was his name? Is it 6529?
Punk6529 is his Twitter handle, yeah.
Okay. Is that his
Twitter
Punk
handle?
also?
We don't know.
Is that the reference to the punk he owns? Like, how does
Correct.
that work? Okay.
I assume so. Yeah. So this guy has a deep thread, and we would be here for 2-3 hours just discussing that one thread. So we won't have time to go into all of it, but we'll link to it and people can check it out. But it kind of sparked off a few ideas around like what the future of NFTs is going to look like, the importance of them, and moving beyond just, funny images of animals, basically. So like, Jack, you're the one who shared it. So first of all, like, what resonated with you, and was there anything to pull at from that thread to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely recommend everybody read it top to bottom. We're not going to do it justice. This guy's like absolute mega giga brain, like a developer in the original Bitcoin protocol, and has like a deep understanding of how like systems that work at this scale work, or how systems of this scale work. But the anchoring thought in this whole thread for me was, I'll read the direct quote. He said, "Memes are the apex object of society, but the architecture and machinery of society in 2021 is an Oracle or an Amazon database." And I think that statement, that's basically, I think we could spend half an hour talking about what that means, or unpacking that idea of NFTs as this technical infrastructure to assign ownership to something that previously was really, really, really difficult, if not impossible, to assign ownership to. And he also, this is a larger discussion. I think another reason the world is catching up on this is, you guys know who Richard Dawkins is? He wrote a book in...
Yeah, he created the word meme.
Yeah, he defined the word meme in the 70s, which is essentially like an idea that replicates organically between people. That's not exactly his description of it, but I think that gets to the essence of it.
Hold on a second. Sorry, Jack, I just want to add, he's an evolutionary biologist. So he studies the nature of evolution. I'm sure most are familiar, but the whole point is he wanted to show how ideas had the same mechanism as our genes do. Our genes pass from our parents to us, and memes, which are the ideas that can pass between individuals, have the same capacity to take on a life of their own and increase through time and dominate society. My last thought before Jack gets back on is Nietzsche said that humans don't have ideas, ideas have humans. That's kind of what this means, right? It's like, everybody thinks they have their own fucking ideas, but no, dude. Like, the idea owns you, right? Like,
we're 4 minutes in and you already got the Nietzsche quote coming out.
I know, but I'm just saying, like if you're Buddhist or you're Christian or you follow Islam, it's like, you didn't come up with that idea, right? That idea owns you. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say.
No, that's great.
I want to frame it.
That's great. And I think like 90% of people, if you ask them what a meme is, they'll say, oh, it's that thing with the image that I've seen a bunch of times with different captions written on it. Yeah. And I think one of the great examples that is in this thread is one of the most powerful memes ever is the American flag. Like that is an encapsulation. Like you could show that to anybody on earth that's ever seen it or participates in society in any connected way, and they would have an idea of what that means to them, right? It's just like this symbol that transmits a incredible amount of information. They're like massively high bandwidth vehicles of communication, and everything is a meme. We talked about this before. It's like a presidential campaign is a meme. A freaking cereal box mascot is a meme.
Yeah, brands are memes as well.
Yeah,
the money
is a meme.
The US dollar is a meme.
Bitcoin's a meme. Ethereum's a meme. Like all of these ideas can only be adopted through like people being able to spread them or talk about them, right? So the idea that the internet is now maybe more of a portion of most people's reality than the physical world, and like the property you inhabit in the physical world does have a massive impact on you as a person and your outcome, both like financially, socially, all of those ideas. And I think what we're seeing that's amazing, I think we talked about this on the last episode, is like people debating the like the pros and cons of owning digital things and whether or not it should be, whether that should be allowed or whether it's necessary or whatever else. And there's this sorry, someone just opened the door, so I lost my train of thought.
That's Celia. We saw Celia. Editor, don't cut this. Keep it in.
Oh, we're definitely keeping it in. Yeah.
So the idea that owning a piece of an idea has been really difficult until now, right? And there's the debate on Twitter about NFTs and crypto and like ownership. There's a few specific people that pop into my mind when I hear like, oh, owning an idea has been possible for ages, right? You can invest in Facebook tomorrow, but you could only invest in Facebook when it became a $15 billion public enterprise. Like you're not getting exposure to that from the beginning, and you don't have a say in the trajectory of it as an owner. So while,
and Jack,
like
to clarify, sorry, just to go on that point, you're saying in contrast, the newer things we're seeing, like the way we've talked about DAOs, where you are able to join the DAO potentially, or even just as a community member within Discord, first of all, forget official DAOs, or like a token owner. And often a lot of these things have governance tokens too. The same way when you buy like stock, a public stock, you like have the yearly meeting or whatever, right? But you're saying it's just becoming easier. Is that what you're saying? There's less of a barrier.
There's a reduction in friction, but it changes the game entirely. It's like you don't have to, to get an early stake in Facebook, you need to be an employee or friends and family round of an employee, likely, right? You had to be in a certain geographical location, or you had to have a connection to a certain type of person to get exposure to this idea over the long term. Like, I think the acronyms and things are almost unhelpful because they just trigger all these like basically low res versions of what they mean. Like you hear NFT and most people see like a Nyan cat or a picture of some dumb cartoon thing, but NFTs as an additional layer of functionality on top of a society that primarily interoperates digitally is like a really fundamental shift in how the world works. And that thread that we referenced is really about like, how do you take that innovation and make it a favorable outcome for people versus like these platforms that have already consolidated so much power and ownership over the internet, just taking that to a whole new level. And I'm not going to be able to get into the like nuances that are in that 6529 thread about like what are the different points in the decision tree where that can go wrong, but that they are outlined in that thread. And then the other like very strange difference in like the economics of all this stuff is the rate at which an idea spreads, if you have ownership in it, is there's an incentive for you to spread these ideas earlier on. So in NFT communities right now, a lot of those things aren't the most inspiring or attractive objectives, right? Just make this thing more valuable because it's cool to have as your profile picture isn't necessarily like a force that's driving the human race forward in the short term. But you can imagine if this is like some decentralized group of biologists that are trying to figure out how to cure X, then you can imagine that the force behind that can really, like, if you can tap into knowledge from all over the world and build an organization that is borderless, et cetera, that's where the idea of early ownership is and aligning incentives much earlier in the journey can really do mental things.
Yeah, man. I think the other thing that really stood out to me in the thread, he talks about TTPs, which stands for, was it third? Do you remember what it stands for? Sorry, trusted third parties.
Yeah.
And you kind of talked about it there, but we don't realize, like, right now, pretty much everything we do in today's society is run by trusted third parties, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, it's got us to this point. Like, in some cases it can be a bad thing. It can be if the trusted third party is evil, and I don't know if you count them as trusted anymore, but you know, like Google and Amazon are trusted third parties with all of our data, right? Facebook with all of our social interactions, and the bank with, you know, whatever's happening in the bank. But I think what I was quite interested in reading this was just honing in on the importance of decentralization, which is obviously a bigger topic. I'm just curious from you guys, like, having followed all this stuff that we've been following for so long, like, is there a tangible example or something where you say, oh, that is where I understood the reasoning why decentralization is a positive thing versus trusting a Google, trusting Chase Bank? Because I know this is a bigger topic, but like, for a lot of people listening to this who aren't really into this world, they're like, okay, trusted third parties work for me, so why do I need to go to this new system that you guys keep talking about? I'm just curious if anything like that has ever clicked for you.
I'll bring up a couple examples. I mean, you know that. So earlier this year, when Trump got kicked off of all the social networks, I mean, that was a big trusted third party moment, right? It was like, okay, whether or not you agree or disagree with this politics, what happened on January 6th is like, you just had an unelected internet company decide who the leader of the free world is. Because if you get knocked off of all the social networks and you can't be searched for, you functionally don't exist in 2021, right? I mean, that's what happened. They took him all. They basically stripped away his power more than the court system could or a legislation could. They did it overnight. So that becomes a question of, should something that is unelected and has almost zero oversight in reality have that much power? I mean, that is a trusted third party kind of conundrum, right? And then look on, by this time it would have been 10 days ago, but Facebook out for 6 hours, right? The amount, I mean, we made jokes about Facebook being out for 6 hours and the memes were freaking hilarious, but there are 2.5 billion WhatsApp users. And outside of North America, WhatsApp is just critical infrastructure, right? And Facebook going down took out WhatsApp. So now that the whole question came up is like, so there are 7 countries in the world right now where over 90% of the population is on WhatsApp. It's insane. It's That's like Nigeria, mental. South Africa, Malaysia, and a couple of other developing countries. So WhatsApp and Facebook being down for us, literally, we were joking about it all day. I was memeing all day, but it was people's livelihood in other parts of the world, right?
And I think a lot of people don't realize in like most of South America and parts of the Middle East and many different parts of the world, that's how you do business too.
That's everything, yeah.
It's not just, oh, I couldn't message my boyfriend, girlfriend, father, son, or whatever. It was like, oh, the business went down because they weren't taking orders via WhatsApp.
Is literally, I mean, India has 400 million WhatsApp users. That's more than America's entire population. And
Mental.
The large majority of them run their businesses on WhatsApp, right? Like to Bilal's point, there are 15 million WhatsApp business users. And this is like their beta business platform. The 15 million in India. Think about that. The small businesses, right? Offline. So the trusted third party question goes around. I think we can kind of tease out the two elements now that we touched on. Is like, one is a censorship question, right? And then within the censorship question, a lot of philosophical things started happening around Trump's banning. Is like, which layer, and we've touched it in the past, which layer do you start banning people on, right? Like, for example, AWS took off Parler, which was the right-wing conservative version of Twitter. They knocked them off the internet. And then people were like, okay, that's kind of scary, because AWS not letting Parler on effectively canceled them from existing, right? So the kind of philosophy that Ben Thompson, a tech writer, super techy, he kind of laid out was like, at which point of the internet infrastructure do you assign people the right to kind of deplatform people? I think he said that, I might be wrong here, but his structure was basically saying at the very bottom, AWS, they probably shouldn't have, they can kind of deplatform people, but at the very top, when you go up to like a community or a social network like Facebook, it's going to have to be a lot more difficult around what you allow. I might be having the order wrong, but the whole point is that different parts of the stack should have different responsibilities around what they're allowed to do. So I think that's a big trusted third party issue. And then obviously we brought the infrastructure question. And the way I would circle it with decentralization is Twitter. So Jack Dorsey is rolling out something called Blue Sky, which is his attempt at creating a decentralized Twitter. He wants to be a protocol which other social networks can be built on. He doesn't want this responsibility of censorship anymore. I mean, and we know how much Jack Dorsey loves crypto, right? But I mean, we've talked about it in the past. The problem with letting kind of communities do their own thing is like, man, if you don't have moderation, it just, everything degenerates into just fucking disaster, right?
We have Twitter right now with moderation and it's still a shit show. So like, it's a huge.
So that's the question, right? It's like you decentralize to be more quote unquote resilient against maybe an outage that happened at Facebook or this deplatforming risk. But then you allow this insane thing where, I mean, Facebook spends $5 billion a year in moderation. If you're not doing that, I mean, this sounds terrible, but you're going to see a lot of beheadings, right? Like terrible things happening to children. Like Facebook spends $5 billion a year to try to keep this out of our face. And the people doing that have an awful existence. So like, these are not easy questions, but I think this touches on the trusted third parties question and why this should exist versus why not.
Yeah, completely.
Nailed it.
Jack, anything else on that before? I mean, there's one other screenshot I was going to share. If you've got something to add, go for it. I was just going to share this in the thread. This kind of stuck with me. This was really cool. So for people who are only listening on the podcast and you can't see, it's basically an example of where things are going in his opinion, right? And I don't know where this is taken from, if he made this himself. But he said, we are here in 2020.
Yes, I think it's their fund. So this is like a slide deck from their fund, yeah.
Oh, amazing. All right, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, so it's like collectibles and art, which is all the JPEGs we're talking about now. But there's also gaming, brands, culture, metaverse, off-chain assets, off-chain governance.
This is, to be, for the listeners, this is an NFT roadmap. This is
exactly.
This is how they're kind of laying out what NFTs can be. And it goes from the left here, collectibles, which Bilal touched on. And then on the farthest, like once they reach, quote unquote, hypothetically, as far as it goes, it's off-chain governance. So now decentralized governance, right? Which actually Patrick Stanley from Citycoin, I mean, that's what that whole thing was kind of getting to, right?
Yeah, and I think it's like transparent markets is an interesting frame to look at things through as well, where if you add like liquidity, global access, and transparency to any market, you immediately, like, price discovery is faster, stuff moves hands faster, like money flows in the direction of the thing that is, I mean, in the short term, you could argue the thing that's generating the most capital, but over the long term, it's like making it easier to move money around should serve the purpose of getting things done that people want done. And I think the idea of trusted third parties in general is like, right now you can make a decision and then leave it up to someone else. The transparency stops at a certain point versus like you being involved in, having a say in, I think, governance, like at a local level is kind of an interesting example for this too. It's like if you were invested in a place you live because you pay taxes, and then people can vote on how their tax dollars are used, and even if you can't vote on them, you can see where they went, right? You can, if this is on chain, or if this is a immutable ledger, it's like, this is the cost that we, the amount of money we spent operating this department. This is how much we spent funding, like cleaning the streets. This is how much we spent funding parks. This is how much we put into education. That doesn't exist right now. And because like the lowest stakes markets, like people trading friggin' pogs and pictures of animals and stuff like that, like that dynamic has been applied to like basically the easiest thing that could possibly be created, which is this thing with like, apart from people that are losing money gambling, it's pretty low stakes stuff, right? It's not like you're running a city or a hospital or something, but the efficient market that you're laying on top of this thing does, like, it makes all of these transactions more efficient. I think over the long term, it like puts capital in the right places.
How do we circle all that back just on that roadmap that they showed, right? We're collectible to arts all the way to off-chain governments. Jack, how can you tie back memes into that, which is what you started with?
Yeah, so I think that's like the layer on top of all of this that is, you could attach a set of memes or a meme to every subsection of that. So Miami coin last week, the Miami meme is bigger than Francis Suarez at this point, right? The Miami meme is like, Florida is one discussion, but Miami specifically is Florida. Like, tech friendly. We're gonna do everything we can to like be hospitable to companies that are, financial technology or blockchain or whatever else. And then that meme kind of replicates. You saw it. Was it Keith Raboy that was the first like big VC to buy a place in Miami, and then it's Peter Thiel's getting a place in Miami, and then everybody else moving to Miami. Every founder that moves there gets tweeted out. And this is not like one line or one image or one, like, there's not one thing that represents that meme, but that meme could be like, oh, maybe Miami is the next like financial technology capital city of the world.
Right. Well, Silicon Valley is a meme, right? Silicon Valley.
Right. Exactly. Perfect analogy. Yeah. That's so that's like, this is the, I don't even know if anybody's coined a good version of that yet, but that's probably what it'll get reduced to, right? It'll probably get packaged in 2 words, 3 words, this thing that's like, okay, that stands for, and the compression happens over time. Like all of this meaning gets, because now you say America, Trump, Biden, or there's like encyclopedias worth of emotion and reactions that are attached to those words, in the same way that like if you said Miami on Twitter 3 years ago, people were like, oh yeah, it's a good night out in Miami.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God, dude, you're right. Yeah.
In certain circles, it means something completely different now. So, and because we're on the computer 8-9 hours a day, and when you explained what a meme is, Trung, it's like you think that you have like a different opinion than everyone else, but you're part of this hive mind, whether you like it or not. If you're participating in these systems and your mind is, you're being exposed to this idea over and over again, maybe you have a different reaction to it, but it grows or shrinks based on people's willingness to spread it and with what spin they put on it. So there's like a meme war on Twitter now, which is like pro NFT, anti NFT, right? They're like duking it out. And I think we all have like our own echo chambers where if you logged into someone else's Twitter account, looked at the feed, it'd be like NFTs, the planet's about to fall out of orbit because of NFTs, versus like we're about to be usher in a new utopia, and we're all going to live to 250 years old and everything's going to be great.
I actually was just listening, Jack, when you were talking, and you mentioned about, let's go back to the Nietzsche quotes, like people don't have ideas, ideas have people. I actually thought up of a very salient example from my own, like just how this example from my own experiences just speaks to how simple it is for people. Like, listen, I'm quote unquote well-read, and I think that I'm quote unquote logical, right? But like, I'll give you that. I went on CNBC. So the segment that I was asked to do was, should Apple acquire a film studio. This is after Amazon acquired MGM. So they're like, hey, Trung, would you come on CNBC and opine on this? I have zero opinion. I have no fucking idea. But they've asked me to go on. So now I have to form an opinion. I literally Google, should Apple buy a film studio? The first article that comes up is like Lionsgate. And so now I think I've come up with this idea that Apple should buy as Lionsgate. And now if you were to tell me that that's a dumb idea, I will fight you to the death over that idea. And my opinion of it was literally built over like a 10-minute, you know what I mean?
Google search session.
It was a 10-minute Google search, and I was forced to make that opinion because of CNBC. And you know, like I hold myself somehow as like, oh, Trung, I'm a pretty rigorous guy. I like doing research. We're like, if I go down the street right now,
is that what you say to yourself? Sorry, I'm a really rigorous guy.
Yeah, no, you know what I mean? Like, you know, obviously in my head, I believe I'm much more rigorous and do more due diligence than I do. But like, I know there's going to be some point in the future when somebody's going to bring up the topic of Apple should buy Lionsgate. I'll be like, yeah, I totally agree with you. But my opinion of that was formed from like the dumbest rationale. But the whole point of why I'm bringing this up is that like this idea that people think they have their own ideas is a joke, right? And I understand this intuitively. I know that my ideas are from other people and I'm just collecting ideas. And somehow their mind and they're influencing how I think and view the world. It's just kind of effed up when you think about it, right?
Very deep philosophical hole to go down.
Completely. Just to summarize from what I was hearing, because I think, like we said in the beginning of this, a lot of people think of meme and they think of a humorous image or video, which is part of the definition. I've Googled it while we're on here. There's two definitions, basically. That's the one that we all think of, or many people think of. But the original definition is an element of a culture or system of behavior that may be considered to be passed from one individual to another by non-genetic means, especially imitation. So with that definition, everything we've talked about, you know, there's the overarching idea, right? And I think, like I've said this to a friend of mine a few nights ago, and he was like, what are you talking about? Meme is just like, you know, the thing that I send my friend in a group chat. And I get what they're saying, right? Because that is also a newer definition. Like, you know, context is obviously important. And the 2021 version of what memes are to a lot of people is that. So by you could say that is the definition as well. But the overarching definition includes something that is passed on by non-genetic means, which is an interesting take. Just to circle this back from the thread to what else we wanted to discuss, one of my favorite parts of his thread, I'm assuming it's a he, because I think he said after NFTs flip and art, NFTs will start eating brands. And if you remember from the diagram, it's like the next one is brands. They'll start eating culture. They will start creating decentralized alternatives to centralized orgs. Are the Bored Apes a silly collectible, or are they a decentralized competitor to Supreme?
That's amazing.
And, you know, NIA listeners will know we talked about this many episodes ago about decentralized Disney, but I do like this take. It's quite an interesting example with Supreme, you know, with limited supply, something cool, something that, yeah, you're wearing a Bored Ape right now. That's amazing. So for people just listening, Jack is wearing a hoodie with Bored Ape on it, right? So that I thought was quite interesting because we, you know, similar to, as a part of this conversation, we also want to talk about how NFTs are kind of eating brands, and that maybe isn't a 10-year thing. This is happening right now, right? So the Cryptoadz that we've talked about on the show has something called a CCO license. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Mm-hmm. And Jack, you just created something yesterday, I think it was, like a hat or something, right? With this IP. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think this is a whole nother topic that we could kind of jump into.
Yeah, I think what's cool about basically the crypto, this is not specific to every crypto project. We talked about on Bored Apes, like the apes you own, you have creative license to use. Like you can't go out and say, I'm Bored Ape Yacht Club, but you could use the visual that you own. And that thesis has been gradually like played with in various different ways. But the Cryptoadz that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think we said this on that podcast, went with Creative Commons license. So that means like anybody, you don't have to own this stuff. You can take it and use it for profit. You can go and like make a film. You could go and sell t-shirts, anything you want, right? And I think talk about long-term play. There is a significance to that decision when you think about there can only be, 6,969 original Cryptoadz, and every single execution of that IP drives like value back to those original holders without requiring layers of approval. Brands to get a campaign out in the world will spend millions of dollars, like go through dozens of layers of approval, and you can like, there are reasons to do that, right? You don't want a Nike swoosh on like, I don't know, a pack of cigarettes, let's say. The weird thing is like, if you give this stuff to like people who are involved in the culture, like, and trust the people that are invested in this to do the right thing with it. And basically, I think back the thesis that the things that people want will continue to multiply, then you're doing something entirely different. And if you zoom out, you're basically crowdsourcing your marketing efforts and your product efforts over the long term, over every like geography, but et cetera, et cetera. So to give a really tangible example, the designers of the Cryptoadz project were involved in that Nouns project that we referenced, and they have these really iconic glasses. So like blocky vector glasses called Nouns glasses, and they're on these noun characters, and they're also on the Cryptoadz. I was like, oh, those are badass. And I put just the glasses on a hat. I was like, those will look cool on a hat, right? Just maybe I can pull up a screen share here.
Yeah,
and because like I'm sort of plugged into the network of people, because I've been talking about toads on Twitter, so there's a bunch of people there. We talk about in the podcast. There's people that are listening to
guys,
it.
we have a running joke. Jack's not gonna like this, but we call him Jack Kramer. He's a Jim Kramer of NFT. except he never misses. Jim Kramer's missed a lot.
I've missed. So check this out. So these I need permission, Bilal. We need decentralized Zoom. Decentralized Zoom.
Yeah, free Jack. No, I've literally done it.
Man, this is a problem with trusted third parties, man.
Oh, wait, let me go.
This is the problem with trusted third parties.
Go on, try it. Try it now.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's working. So I'll get you boys, I'll get these sent, but check these out. So you got these little glasses, just a cool little hat. And I messaged one of the guys that's involved in the project. I was like, is this cool? I think these are badass. Like, is it cool if I put these out? Knowing that the answer was going to be yes, but just like to get the idea, like, or just to kind of test the thesis. It's like, oh, those are cool. I said, oh, can I send you one? He's like, no, I don't have a mailing address. I'm remaining anonymous, but I'd love to see them on other people's heads.
I'm remaining anonymous. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I just did this. I just like, okay, I'll make them available for 69 minutes. The ethos that they're going to be limited run. You can only get them if you're here now. And I think we sold 176 of them in an hour.
Oh my God. How much was one?
$29.
176. Yeah, what, 5K?
So it's like 75. It's like $7,500. And obviously, there's margins and shit in there. But the idea of, we've talked about this before, like permissionlessness and like building a brand from scratch is hard as hell. And that's what people have been doing for years and years, right? Like, I want to start my own clothing brand. And in some cases, yeah, great, you should do that. Or I want to start my own animation studio, or I want to be a graphic designer and win my own clients. This is like, and there's like an economic engine, and it's silly right now, right? It's a bunch of cartoon toads, but it is this network that you can plug into that already has product market fit, narrative market fit, whatever you want to call it. And you can add value to that network without permission, without fear of legal repercussion. Like, you're not screen printing Nike swooshes and going down the market, right? So it's a really simple example, but it just gets to this idea of a completely different incentive set, and it starts a totally different set of behaviors. And beyond this thing that I've done, you can, like, people are making games, like taking the characters, putting them in games. They're doing like, there's the socks project, Bilal, which we've been talking about. Yeah, I've got
some socks, and I've got, what is it? The Chodes
as well,
which look pretty cool. They actually look really cool.
Guys, hold on a second. So later in this episode, listeners and viewers, we interviewed employee number one at Aussie, which we're going to tag on to the end of this convo. And Aussie Media, the beleaguered media company, been around since 2013. But employee number one, Eugene Robinson, made an amazing insight, which you'll hear soon enough. He's talking about how when he realized that the whole thing was a house of cards, he was 4 or 5 years into it. And he was calling up people and being like, hey, my name's Eugene Robinson, calling from Aussie Media. No one had any fucking idea what he was talking about. No idea what Aussie Media was. But I think this is like the flip of what Jack did, right? It's like Aussie Media, this totally centralized, raised 80 million, try to brand everything, try to be cool. And Eugene talks about it later in this episode. But the whole point is that they tried to force this down people's throats and just nothing. Whereas to Jack's point, CCL, Creative Commons license, doesn't matter. Anybody can do anything. Jack goes out, makes up these stupid glasses, which is kind of cool hat actually. And like, it just made nouns more valuable, right? And just like didn't have to ask permission.
All right. What I was just going to say is, the fact that, back to that original thread we were talking about, like in this case, you can just, that's a physical product, but the chodes or the socks or whatever, those are like just go to a website, click a button, and you claim it because you already own this thing, right? And they already know there's at least close to 7,000 people that want these because you're going to claim it for free. So much so that now they're selling on secondary market for like $1,000, just this one thing that is not the official thing. So I think it's an interesting thing where you can just airdrop like something that you've created, obviously with permission or like following the license that's out there. And I guess the question is, though, over time, as it becomes bigger, how do you control for that? It's the reason why a really small designer down the road in Brooklyn is maybe okay with someone doing something like this, potentially compared to a Nike, because Nike needs to control the brand, or even more so like the high-end luxury brands. They care even LVMH, more so than anyone. Yeah. Exactly. So it is interesting to think, like, Jack, you're a brand guy, right? Like, will this erode will it water down or erode the brand value? And I think in the short term, we're seeing it's not. Like, it seems to be expanding and growing the meme essentially. But if this was 5 years down the road, would this erode the kind of value of that original brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's like how aligned the project was, like, because it was born in that ethos that, like, if LVMH or Nike said tomorrow, hey, a CCO season on LVMH and Nike, that's like basically that stock chart is taking a complete dive, right? It's just completely implodes itself. And I think they'll all try and do maybe they'll do like pockets of experiments where they get people involved in that. Like, wasn't Virgil talking about doing
metaverse. He's
NFTs in the metaverse.
LV, all the Fortnites and all that kind of stuff. And there's definitely a level of control that brands like that want to have because they're already massive memes. People already have this lofty association of what this thing is. And
which
then if you see something else,
years, right? Or Nike took decades and
right.
hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing and advertising.
Yeah, and it's this is maybe an argument for why the bottom up things will be stronger, because they're like organically validated memes rather than these things you're trying to force into the market from the top down, which are much harder to do. And like, you're selecting for the types of people that identify with that ethos from day zero versus like trying to basically ride a new trend or like a new, I don't know, obviously brands will execute well on Web3, but I can't imagine any brand just being like, hey, we're open source and everything, go for it. Maybe like real risk takers will do that, but it's also like, I think it's so niche and so tight within like a very specific culture that everything that comes out of it kind of is produced by people that are all consumed with this stuff. It's not like, it's not like people that are that occupy an entirely different world, just like are being opportunistic and getting involved in this. Like, you have to be so intimately you have to understand it so intimately. Like there's probably only 50,000 people on the planet that are even like, that's maybe an underestimation, a couple 100,000 people on the planet. What is it? 250,000 OpenSea wallets. So like, even if you don't own it, there's still only a small subset of people that know it's possible to own this thing. And those people are so absorbed in this culture that I think they produce things that are more in line than someone like a Nike putting that call to arms out. It's like 0.0001% of people that consume or use their stuff even knows what the hell this is. So it's just a complete 180 in that sense as well.
Do you know where I think it's going to go, boys? I think, if you think of 2017 as the time where Bitcoin went on that crazy run, Ethereum went on that crazy run, and it brought a lot of people into the space, including me and Jack, I think, around the same time, right? Even if we had all heard about it before and Trung wrote his MBA paper on it or whatever, like that was the time where people took notice because there was a sense of urgency to be like, everyone's making all this money. My barber's talking about it. What the hell am I doing not learning about this thing? And even, there's plenty of people, like I think even Punk6529 even said, like they got involved with it early on because they're like, what is this thing? And then the second wave comes later where you're like, oh, now I'm here. Like, oh, you start learning about what decentralization is. And you're like, oh, what are these other things they're building on top of it? And then you're like, oh, DeFi, what the hell? We're taking out the banks completely, like don't even have to be there to give someone a loan. So that's to me like the life cycle I've gone through. And I think like NFTs of kind of having that moment right now where there's been so much hype, which comes with the highs and lows, comes with the crazy press. Like my dad messaged me this morning because I told him about Cryptoadz.
Which toad am I buying? Bilal, which toad am I buying?
I said him and my mum were on FaceTime and I was like, yeah, I bought this thing. It's worth X amount now. And they're like, what? They almost fell off their chair. And then my dad sends me a thing this morning saying like, yeah, there's some scam that happened. Be careful. And I'm like, yeah,
the evil ape. Yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, hold on, guys. Update. What's your toad return right now, Bilal?
Oh, mine. I mean, I bought mine for 2, and it's up to 10, 15. It depends on the day you're looking at. So,
Jack, what about you, brother? Hold on.
I mean,
I got most of mine 0.18, 0.2 something. I got a nice little McDonald's one too. It's real rare.
I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, yeah. So look, Jack's sitting on some retirement.
Jack Kramer,
killing it. I mean, look, go on, Jack.
It's crazy, man. I think like it really struck a chord for that reason because of the license thing and the first of its kind. Like, I think Bored Apes had that like commercial use, which was a new mechanic, and then this is like a slightly different tweak on the mechanic. And there are other things, other projects that aren't new in terms of the way they are, the way the mechanics or the like setup of the projects is different, and maybe the art and the community can carry that. But I think honestly, over the long term, like anything collectible is like it had some historical significance or it did something first, and that like cements it in some ways. So while all of this stuff is like insanely speculative, and if you have any bills to pay, like all the money that goes into this stuff should be just like consider it lit on fire, obviously. But the ones that I think would have any shot at being long-term relevant are like, oh, NFTs completely changed the way humans conduct commerce, and these projects were all the first to introduce this mechanic to NFTs.
But Bilal's out to when he's back in the UK next time. They're gonna be out to brunch with his family, and his dad's gonna be the bill's gonna come in. His dad's gonna be and Bilal's just gonna grab his dad's hand and be like, "Dad, I got this, Dad. Don't worry about
it." Do you accept toads?
Yeah. You know what though? Here's a crazy idea. Like somebody could start a like toad-backed mortgage security or credit card. Right?
Oh my God, 100%.
So you have a toad
the
card.
white label. Yeah.
Toad card, and then like some freaking toad coin, which is, being staked and yields X for whatever economics that they put into this thing. And you're like, yeah, I will pay for brunch with my toad card, and I'm using my toad as collateral, and then I'll, whatever DeFi yield I'm getting, I'll pay off the balance.
It's incredible. Like, one thing I wanted to say on the toes, just to wrap it up there, is I've been chatting to a lot of people over the last week because toads went up from 2 to 10 to 15, and by the time you listen to this, who knows, it might be way down, it might be way up, who knows, right? But like, someone actually messaged me, someone who listens to the show, Henry, he messaged me this morning about something, and he was like, man, the toads are going down. And I'm like, dude, it went up from 2 to 10 in a week, like 10 to 15. So, I mean, we have to have a longer time horizon with these things. But the second thing I was going to say is, because I'm like really new to this stuff, I've just something I've been looking out for is when you go in the Discords, see what people are talking about. If they're creating projects and they're saying, hey, look at these socks that I made, look at these whatever I made, like, that is a very good sign, in my opinion, in my amateur opinion. And when people are saying one toad, obviously it's a joke, but that is another good sign. But when you go into some other Discords, you just see people being like, hey, I want to sell this thing. And as soon as you just see everyone's only flipping, of course, like, there's flipping happening across the board, I'm not against that, but if it's just strictly that, is a very different level of community. Whereas I'm not in the Bored Ape one, but I'm sure there's a lot more interesting discussions going on there. So that's just my amateur take from the 2 weeks I've been in the NFT world.
It's up there with professional opinion, with given how long the space has been around. It's a good point.
Trung, I just see Trung laughing the whole way. So, like, what are you thinking?
Dude, we chat in the Telegram. I can't remember one of our good community members. I don't know if you call it whatever, whoever's in the chat. They replied to one of the things, and just a lot of toad holders in the NIA Telegram.
There's a lot of toad holders.
Oh, and I mean, it's just funny. Like, I don't have a toad. Half the group's got a toad, and you guys are eating right now. And I'm just wanting to. I'm not Matt. What am I gonna do? I just bought Bitcoin at 55K. I'm a sucker, right? Like, what do you want me to tell you? Like, I'm an idiot. Like, fiat fan. I'm basically back to fiat fan, missing all this NFT boat. But anyways, man, I love it, dude. I have
to say, the FOMO I got from the Bored Ape is what got me ready to, like, get MetaMask ready, have some ETH kind of ready to put into this. Just what I was like, oh, when it's ready, I need to know how it works. And honestly, the only way I learned it was on the podcast when you shared your screen, and I was saying if it was like really tactical, and I was like, hey, can you go to the filter? Like, what does that price mean? Because I didn't understand that until now. Now I'm an expert in OpenSea.
Dry powder, bro.
All right, man. So anyway,
amazing.
Congrats to all the toad holders. If we're making it, we're making it. If not, we're going down in flames, man. But all right, let's wrap this up, boys, because I know we got one last topic.
Let's go quickly. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. Let's do it.
Trung, you've been doing some research into the youngest. Is he now the youngest billionaire in the world?
He is. He's not the youngest billionaire. He is at 29
youngest
years old. Sam
Bankman-Fried,
the head of FTX Trading, which is a crypto exchange, is the youngest person other than Mark Zuckerberg to have $23 billion, or like that ballpark. Just mind blowing. Well, our good, Rick Burton, early Stripe employee, Twitter flamethrower. Somebody posted because SBF was on the cover of Forbes. Forbes did this whole thing. They did the new top 40. Sam Bankman-Fried, founder, CEO of FTX Trading, was on the cover. Somebody basically posted that, and somebody wrote to the effect of, the richest person under 30. And then Rick just went, hold on, how old is John Collison, the Patrick Collison's brother, who co-founded Stripe?
Oh, got it.
No, but John is 31. Those guys are probably worth about 20 to 30 bill each. Stripe is trading in private markets right now, $240 billion.
Insane.
You want to know one day pop? That thing IPOs is going to be $304 billion company. It's insane. But yeah, dude. So I'll just do Sam super quickly. A lot of this information is from Jack's former collaborator, Mario Gabriel. Mario's The Generalist newsletter. It's amazing. Everybody should download it. The Generalist. He did a 3-part series about
download it. Bilal's laughing at that too.
Wait, are you laughing at the way he does the Generalist with the hand? Or
No, I was laughing at everybody should download it.
Everybody should
download the email.
Subscribe to The Generalist.
Yeah.
Fiat fan living in the 90s, right? Oh my God. This is why I don't own a toad.
Everyone should print out the Journalist at the Generalist and have a read.
go to the library, print it out, and then read it in the library and give it back to the librarian. But he actually interviewed Sam Bankman-Fried. But so I'll talk about the Forbes article first, and then I'll talk about Mario's piece, which is more strategy. So Sam Bankman-Fried, MIT student, studied physics. His parents were, I believe, his parents were both law professors. Might have been at Stanford, and he thought he was going to be an academic. But a couple episodes ago, when Jack was talking about his Afghanistan relief charity work with NFTs, I mentioned at the end of the episode about effective altruism, just the idea of there's this whole charity movement, and obviously Bilal knows a lot about it, having worked with Charity Water, is a lot of people have attached themselves to effective altruism, which is basically being the most quantitative, data-driven way to spend money for charity. It's like you find the best way that a dollar can affect people's lives. And basically, Sam Bankman-Fried, while he was in university, read about effective altruism. And he's like, okay, so I kind of know what my purpose in life is right now. He's like, I need to make as much money as humanly possible. And then I can direct those funds in the most quantitatively data-driven way to affect positively people's lives. So he thought initially he was going to be a physics professor, but then his first job out of school was to become a trader with Jane Street, which is a big financial institution. I can't remember what he was trading. I think he was trading currencies. And he put together some money, nothing crazy. And he, around 2017, 2018, Bilal, you mentioned it, the whole crypto run up, he saw these crazy things were happening in crypto. And the crazy thing about Sam Bankman-Fried, everybody calls him SBF, is that he is not an ideologue at all. He doesn't even care about crypto. He says it in the Forbes piece. He's like, if I can make this much money selling orange juice futures, I would. He's like, I just want to make as much money as humanly possible. Like what a legend.
I love that he's just keeping it real though. Like he's being honest.
He's like, listen, I don't care. He's like,
mess around.
I'm not a Bitcoin maximist. Like I'm not Michael Saylor, right? Like he's the richest Bitcoin guy by far.
There is a second best.
Who's richer than him for Bitcoin?
No, crypto. I'm just saying his
Satoshi.
position is there is a second best.
Yeah,
oh, yeah, exactly.
Very many, right? But I mean, Brian Armstrong's worth $10 billion. So he's twice as much as the CEO of Coinbase. Satoshi might be the only guy that's richer than him, right? And who fucking knows Satoshi is, unless it's Vladimir Putin, whatever. So Sam Bankman-Fried.
Heard it here first.
Yeah, heard it here first. 2018, 2017, the run up. He found a crazy hack. Is that he could buy, it was either buy Bitcoin in the US and sell it in Japan for like a 30 to 40% markup. Is one of those ways. But he was finding this massive arbitrage, and he was making, I think at one point, tens of millions of dollars a day, arbing this crazy Bitcoin.
I love that so much. Dude. What a legend.
And so this is he had left Jane Street at the time, and he's like, I'm going to. And then when he went through the entire experience, what he realized is that none of these exchanges are set up for like professional traders. Sure, right? It's early. He's like, I'm going to make that exchange, and so the founder of Binance, CZ, invested in him. Binance is the world's biggest crypto exchange, and I'll tell you the crazy thing about Binance. So the CZ invested $70 million in FTX, which is only 3 years old. And Sam Bankman-Fried rebought that stake from CZ for $2.3 billion. So he rebought his FTX stake after 3 years. So this Binance dude made a like 30 times return on $70 million. But anyways, back to it, FTX based in Hong Kong, so it could go around all the rules. A lot of it wasn't really, a lot of it was actually built around derivatives trading, like trading off of the movement of crypto, because there's a lot more volume in that. And he took I think 0.03% of each trade, but like TLDR is that his company, FTX, is worth like 25, 30 bill now.
And they built it on Solana, I think, right? Because this was one of the big wins for Solana. I don't know if that's an accurate statement, but that was one of the big wins for
I know they are
Solana.
very close. Yeah, I don't know the full details of that, but he also has a trading arm called Alameda. A lot of concern around FTX is that Alameda was kind of benefiting from the fact that he owned this exchange and he had this big investing fund. But anyways, all of this to wrap up is that they have one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. And a lot of the listeners have probably seen though FTX has gone absolutely batshit crazy with US marketing. They raised $900 million over the summer at an $18 billion valuation. $900 million. And they've already put $500 million in that into naming rights. They named the Miami Heat Stadium. They bought a popular esports team, and they have a partnership with Tom Brady, Steph Curry. And the reason why he's doing all this is because he's aggressively going after retail now, retail traders and retail investors. And the derivatives business is interesting because it is much more professionalized. But what's kind of happening, and this is where Mario Gabriel comes in, download/subscribe to the Generalist, is Mario was talking about they have this huge war chest now. And Mario's like, man, you have that money, and the main concern for SBF is customer acquisition. He wants retail. So that's why he's getting into sports. It's like this derivatives business, which is a lot of betting. They might go into sports betting, right? So they're just like, they started in this niche of crypto. But again, SBF doesn't care about crypto. He cares about making as much money as humanly possible. So Mario said there's some pretty crazy things they could do. Like Mario said they should buy Reddit. If you want to acquire customers, right? You want to acquire, if you care about, go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say, just while you're still on that there, I think they're launching an NFT platform as well.
Yeah.
Like look at the volume OpenSea is doing right now. If they can take a slice of that. Or
exactly.
Buy OpenSea, FTX OpenSea.
100%, right? They're not completely agnostic. They like use crypto as the wedge. And so the Forbes article kind of touches like this is his whole point is that he wants to do this, but he's actually given away very little. I think he's given away the equivalent of 0.01% of his wealth. Still material, right? For how rich he is. But they asked him about that in the article. He's like, no, it's because I plan to give away everything. I'm just not doing it now because it's going to get much bigger, right? He's very illiquid. Like a lot of people that are rich, I mean, we've talked about it, right? You can borrow against your wealth if you own all these things. So he is extremely illiquid. So all his wealth is tied up in these companies. But pretty similar to Elon, actually. Elon's all tied up in Tesla and SpaceX. But the whole point being, this guy is making so much money. He doesn't care how he's doing it. He's found that crypto is the way. But if orange juice futures are the way to do it, he might just do that. And the youngest guy, yeah, it's amazing. It's extraordinary
to execute at that level and be like, not like, the Brian Armstrong, where it's like, this is my philosophy about how the world should be in 100 years. This guy's just like, this is the market where I can just get
you want to talk about gigabrain? Yeah. Like you want to talk about like, think about how smart this guy is, right? And like this is one of the investors is like, I've never seen anybody move this fast. Like this guy he lives in the Bahamas now. So he's running the operation in Hong Kong, but now obviously there's a lot of like regulation, tax benefits from living in Bahamas. But yeah, dude, this is all the guy cares about. And in the next year, everybody's going to FTX. They're going to spend so much money just blanketing America to try to win the retail thing. And not to say that they will. I mean, they go up against Square, Coinbase. Everybody's trying to break into these things. But man, I find it hard to bet against this dude based on what he's accomplished.
What are the platforms that have the most market share? Like, is Robinhood even materially up there?
So he would have to. He's trying to play in every space. So he's going up against wallets and payments, against the Squares and Venmos. He wants to have stock trading. They haven't done material yet, but he's talked about it. He's like, listen, whatever we can do, we have the wedge. We want in. He wants to be one of these supermarkets, right? He wants to be like Square is. How Square has crypto trading, stock trading, has the wallets. He wants to be like that.
You know what's funny? I wonder, maybe this won't make a difference, but it's all of these consumer platforms have like the cute Silicon Valley brand and name, and FTX is like, I don't know if there's some adoption hesitancy for like retail users to like get on a acronym platform. It feels like Bloomberg terminally.
No, 100%. Well, and his background, I mean, he talks about in Argos, like his background is that he was much more focused at the professionals. So, I mean, it's no guarantee that he'll be able to bridge it. But the orange juice futures code just put me on the floor, man.
That summarizes it.
This guy just does not, I don't care how. I just want to be rich. And it's for very explicitly the purpose of giving it all away.
Did he say anything about where he's giving it away or what? Like,
no, just like he just mentioned, he said specifically effective altruism is just, so it's like by the time, whatever, let's say in 5-10 years, he'll have $100 billion. What's the most pressing thing in that time? Is it going to be climate change? Like, what is it going to be, right? He's just going to direct as many resources. He's going to do the Bill Gates thing, right? He's doing the Bill Gates. Although Bill Gates is not exactly effective altruism, but I imagine he's in that mold. Dustin Moskovitz is the other one that does this, right? From Asana, the Facebook co-founder, worth about $20 billion. he's a effective altruist. So like the listeners, the last thing I'll add is like you can Google Dustin Moskovitz like Excel spreadsheet, and he like shows you how he thinks about charity. Like him and his wife Carrie Tuna are like very into this whole effective altruism EA movement, and they just want give me numbers, man. Man, Bilal, you probably know about Dustin Moskovitz as a charity guy, yeah?
Yeah, a little bit, but no, I just think it's cool. I think it's a cool idea. I do think one thing to wrap it up is I think by the time you've got 20, 30 billion, you've got more than enough money to like give, right? Like it's not going to make that much of a difference necessarily of like spending another 30 years accumulating wealth, but like everyone can make their own choice. I think it's less about the money, it's more about the focus, like the time and energy. Right. So like with Bill Gates, like he left and then he went and created the foundation and then like actually was working on it versus like, oh, here's a bunch of money to someone else. I think at that level, that's what they're thinking of, which is fair enough.
Yeah, I agree. He's 29 years old.
And the other side of the equation, I think this like on a small scale, people think about this. It's like, I think didn't Buffett like get a lot of heat for this? It's like, I'm going to give all my money away, but I'm going to wait 50 years to do it. It's like, well, you can, how much change could you affect right now? And there's like the weighing off the like compounding of X amount versus like giving a consistent amount now. And you talked about that, Bilal, right? Like Charity Water, one of the narratives was like, get the, like the invest in doing it now because you make it a part of your lifestyle. Yeah. So it's an interesting different,
and I think that's the thing. These guys probably are. I'm sure they are giving stuff, right? Like, and I'm sure they're involved with some stuff. But I think the full focus, let's go for it. Like that's their choice. Like I completely respect that. But yeah, I do agree. Like once you understand, like, oh, I don't have to give all my wealth away right now. I can still give a percentage away. It's just like you get to enjoy it throughout your life. It's like it's the same logic to don't just work forever just to one day retire. Right. And like one day I'm going to go on a vacation or I'm going to travel or do whatever, jump out of a plane. Like you can do all those things along the way. That's just my opinion right now. But I also don't have $29 billion. So ask me when I get there. So fair enough. All right, boys, should we wrap it up? Anything else, Trung, on the FTX stuff? That was great, man. Thanks for sharing that. That was quite interesting.
All right, so guys, the last thing we're going to add, we mentioned earlier in this episode, we interviewed Eugene Robinson, employee number 1 at Aussie Media. So from last episode, the whole thing is just a total roller coaster, and the details might have changed by the time you hear this because it's going to be a week later. But we mentioned Aussie Media shut down, but then Carlos Watson, the CEO, has gone on a press tour saying that, no, we're still back. And we're going to keep doing it. But in the time that he's going on this press tour, it's come out that they took a PPP loan from a pandemic from the government and no one knows where that money went. And then none of the employees actually have agreed to come back. So we just have no idea where it's at. But we got Aussie Media employee number 1, Eugene Robinson, and he's just going to break down some, not necessarily timely. He's going to talk about just his experience there.
He was hilarious too. Great energy, man. So I think you guys will enjoy it. Let us know what you think of it. Make sure you're subscribed across all the platforms and join the Telegram group. And if you like this, let us know. You can let us know in the comments below. That's just the easiest way to help us out. Just click the like button, smash it, write a comment, and we will speak to you guys next week. And have a good one. All right, welcome. We've got a special guest here today, Eugene Robinson. Thanks for joining the show, man. We're excited to have you on, man. I know we've got lots to talk about, so let's get straight into it. You were the first employee at Aussie, is that correct?
Aussie, I was employee number 1, according to Louise Rogers, who was a former chairwoman of the board. I wasn't sure. I thought I was number 2, but it turns out I was number 1.
Well, right. Which one do you like going with?
Well, number 1 has got a certain amount of distinction, right?
Yeah. Always pick number 1, man. So the reason we brought you on today is because the last episode, people already know this if they've heard it from last week, but we did a little bit of a breakdown of the Aussie story, and we know there's like lots of moving parts. So even today, as we're recording, there's been a bunch of stuff that just dropped. So we're going to touch on a few of those things, but obviously a heads up to the listener that this is an evolving story, right? So like by the time you listen to this, maybe there'll be some things that have changed again. But more than that, we want to get your perspective on, what it was like there, the real kind of like firsthand experience. I know you had this great Substack post that you put out, and I think you just said something was published in the New York Times like 20 minutes ago, right?
20 minutes ago, I think the piece was what it was like to work at Ozzy, which was not my original title. My original title was The Lingering Stink of Hope and Promise.
Oh, man. Yo, that would get way more clicks, yo.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did they change the title to that? That was...
Yeah, the old gray lady does what it does, I guess. So,
well, actually, Eugene, could you just tell us actually what you're kind of up to now? And I'd love to get your background, even just outside of Ozzy in general, before the lead up to that article, and love to hear more about that article, if possible.
Well, I had an interesting path, right? I'm originally a New Yorker, came out to California to go to Stanford, but I've done journalism since. I think I probably published my first piece in 1976.
Holy smokes.
It was on music or something. And then I think I wrote my first query letter when I was 9 to Esquire. So it's pretty much all I've ever really wanted to do.
Okay.
But after I got to California, I started doing music. I had a hardcore band called Whipping Boy, and I was disinclined to leave and go back to New York, which would have made sense if you were a serious journalist. But I had to make do with West Coast publishing. And so I have a kind of a weird career of both doing real world publishing, like for Ziff Davis, or business, B2B publications, journals like EQ Magazine. I worked for Larry Flint for a bunch.
Hustle.
Yeah, he put out Code. He did straight publications too. Code Magazine was a men's magazine that was a challenger to GQ. I've written for GQ. But I've also worked inside at Apple with, Steve Jobs, interestingly enough, or Intel with Andy Grove, and continue to do music the whole time. I grew up as a kind of like a competitive bodybuilder, and then moved from that to watched the first UFC, got obsessed with mixed martial arts, and then for the last, I don't know, God knows, 15 years, been taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So all of these factor in actually in a weird way to the story, but I got to Ozzy because my former boss at Q Magazine was this woman, Louise Rogers, who was on the board, and she was the first one to meet Carlos and pull me into the creation of West Coast digital media the way it should be done, which was a general idea. And so, the hope and promise I spoke of in the killed title for the New York Times piece is, that's a lot of us who were serious people in media who came to it to do media, came to it with the sense of hope and promise. And of course, that's not what it ended up smelling like at all. So,
so question I had actually around that, I love your insight on it. It's probably not, a little bit more separate than Ozzy, is like with all these other ones that came up around the same time, like the Vices, the BuzzFeed, and you see the success of Axios, Political. How do you kind of see these other players in the ecosystem? And if you could have redone it and it worked out better, I guess, which one of those routes were more attractive, if at all, if any of them?
Well, I freelanced for Vice on and off for 10 years. Maybe lastly and most significantly for their vertical, the Fightland vertical. But I think my first piece was that ended up in the Vice Guide to Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, was a piece actually on fighting, which they've never paid me for, incidentally. And it would be nice to get finally. I keep bugging Shane Smith on Instagram about where's, quack, when will I get my money back? But I guess I gotta bring somehow the physical threat, or what am I gonna need to get them to take me seriously? So, but look, the media is not going through anything that anybody who's been involved in music hasn't already gone through. You know, on the one hand, through the music I do, I've got fans now in Madagascar because my music is easily and readily available on the internet. On the other hand, there are not enough people in Madagascar to put together a tour to Madagascar. So it's nice that more people are getting to listen to your music, but it doesn't do much for your bottom line, and that fact alone creates this kind of positioning. And that's why I opened the Substack piece with the guy in Tel Aviv, the 3-card Monty deal, where all kinds of strange players can get involved. And they're like, yeah, we expect you to make money, so we'll give you money until you make money. Call it a loan, call it investment, call it $83 million of something that, you know, easily anybody in publishing would know. Yeah, I could have done that for you. How many publishers does it take to blow through $83 million? All of them.
Yeah.
I mean, but they could have all done it for half the price. So I don't know. I mean, I'm originally at base root a magazine guy. That's always what attracted all I ever wanted to do. And insofar as any of those publications you mentioned are more or less like magazines, they've gotten my attention. And I have to say, I like comedy. I was always a big fan of National Lampoon. So I think BuzzFeed would have been the likeliest. But, you know, everybody gets seduced away in the end by this news. You know, frankly, like I mentioned again in the Substack piece, or no, I mentioned it in the New York Times piece, that, you know, Haitian poverty crusaders, you know, South American politicos, you know, my kids like that kind of stuff. But generally, for me personally, I'm up for an easy read. I'll read crime. That's it. The heaviest thing that I'll read is crime, and maybe politics every now and then. But I'm not all over the news thing. So
fair enough. And I know the Aussie approach was kind of to do these more undercovered stories, and it kind of pivoted multiple times, as you well know, through the kind of the years, and when it looked like something wasn't working, when it did work. A bit more of a pointed question was more recently, over the past 12 to 15 months, it looked like it went all in on Carlos Watson on YouTube, right? I would just love to get whatever you want to divulge about that kind of specific pivot, which is what I've kind of latched onto the most as like, that to me was like the red flag in the sense of like, when you put everything around the founder CEO, and it's a media company that's supposed to be covering all these other elements, that kind of looks suspicious to me.
Man, let me tell you, you know, I'm at a certain point where we're having a discussion with Samir, the COO, who's been, I guess, fired, but who also was the one who was supposedly using the digital voice changer on the call with Goldman Sachs. One of the things he said as he was terminating me for refusing to pull down my Substack was that he said, you know, it was, you know, your job. And I go, well, let's stop there for a second. Let's talk about my job as it stands presently. This conversation was in June 2021. So let's talk very specifically about my job at Ozzy, which constitutes doing newsletters, you know, 15 to 20 item newsletters, of which 90% point to outside sources and involve no more than 50 words a piece. None of that is new or next. And editing transcripts for the Carlos Watson show. And I said, I am in a living hell is how I described it to him. And he paused and goes, well, that's a discussion for another time. And I was like, you know, it's one thing to watch an occasional show. It's another thing to edit transcript after transcript that was supposed to provide the editorial narrative for a piece that would be another inroad in for an interested viewer, ultimately an interested viewer into the Carlos Watson show. But, you know, you're talking about a landscape that now includes cats like Eric Andre, Jimmy Kimmel, Trevor Noah. I don't even like Fallon much, but Fallon, Bill Maher. I mean, you know, the fat guy in the car with the singing, you know.
Oh, Corden, James Corden?
James Corden, yeah, that's hilarious.
James Corden. This is a very challenging landscape, you know. So you're going to step up to that table, and what's the brand differentiator? And I'm reading through these transcripts and asking the same questions again and again and again and again. And that's why I quoted the Herzog response, because it was like the perfect one. He's like, yeah, we got to hang out. We're in LA sometimes, man. It's like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Werner Herzog movie, but this is not the cat that's hanging out, right?
No, yeah. He's a different cat entirely, right? He's like an old.
Yeah, I speak a little German. Spent a bunch of. I actually had a TV show in Germany called the Eugene Robinson Show for a bit, and on Viva TV. So and Herzog just stops. It was like, and I'm reading the transcript. I've never watched the show. He's like, yeah, in 400 years.
Yeah.
And then he repeats it again. He's like, no, we should hang out. And then Werner Herzog, yeah, 400 years we could hang out, which was really the most perfect and most German thing he could have actually ever said.
Right.
So this was my work day. And so everything suborned to a TV show that was unproven. I mean, I've said before, and I've said it to him in this instance being Carlos Watson, and I've been very public about this, you can never convince anybody that you're sexy by telling them that you're sexy. That's not how it works. That's not how funny works. None of this stuff. So, hip, cool, the voice of a Jedi, you just can't make that stuff up. You can't, you can't show up one day and your friends go, hey, Jimmy. And you go, oh, no. I'm not Jimmy. I'm He-Man. What the He-Man? What the fuck?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, that's my new nickname. Who gave you that nickname? Well, I gave it to myself. You can't. And that's fundamentally what happened, So
wait, Eugene. So I only have two more, then I'll pass the baton to these guys. This question is there any world where if Ben Smith didn't publish the piece, and let's just say didn't even try to commit allegedly securities fraud, is there any world where pumping all the money into pushing the YouTube show and then convincing maybe a Hulu, Amazon, or A&E ultimately to buy the show would give more money? And is there a world where if that had just keep spinning, it could have gone and it could have actually worked out? No.
Oh, because the act of viewing, and more so when you talk about digital media, the act of viewing is super private, and I'm not beholden to anybody.
Right.
I'm not beholden to anybody about my viewing choices, which is why porn has succeeded so well on the internet. You just don't have to answer to anybody about what you're going to watch. I don't have. It's not like when there were 3 channels and you had to watch one of them, or BBC One and BBC Two in England. So the fact that I would choose on any given day, that I would choose to give up portions of my day, the idea was, I guess, to pick A-list, because A-list has a built-in audience and that audience would pour it over. But this is the same problem I had with Ozzy Fest. You might show up because you like Common, who played one of the Ozzy Fest. But just because you like Common doesn't mean you give a crap about reading Ozzy.com, which is painful for real folks. It's like, this is not our audience. This is an audience, but it's not our audience. Well, who's our audience? We don't know. Never saw those figures. So
never. If you were to, if somebody would be like, a crude way to put a gun to your head, like you had to say who was the archetypal Aussie reader, who would you say that is?
Well, we know we had a guy come in. It was great. We had a guy come in, and we would have these multiple retreats where you'd have to give up your whole weekend to sit in some business center and essentially have. I mean, some of it was pretty useful, like kind of brainstorming stuff to come up in the next quarter. But then some of it was a lot of, glad handing, back slapping, self-congratulation. And the reality of it is somebody said, James, John, whatever the guy's name was, he's now here to, to drill down on our readership. And maybe you could give us a little bit. And the guy said, yeah, well, leastways from what I figured out, based on the numbers I crunched and doing audience surveys. And so, 10,000 person audience survey is that the average Aussie reader is a 70-year-old white woman.
Not like that demographic can make money.
Wait. So we break for lunch and dude is gone after lunch, like gone. Seen him again, never heard from him again. I want to call witness protection program. I don't know what happened to him, but that was the end of him. We never saw him again after that. So,
oh my goodness. All right, man. The total last one for me, and you guys take it from here, is so Carlos is going on this kind of crazy media tour to trying to salvage whatever. I don't know if there's anything left to salvage. Is this consistent with what you know of him as a person? And is it just like, this guy's just gonna go down with the ship? Is this what's happening?
Well, I was pretty dispassionate about it until I got a call from the New York Times saying, we've got a character issue here. And I go, character issue? What are you talking about? And they said, Carlos we shared your quotes with him, and he's made a counterclaim that you got a criminal record with a past history as a drug user. Could you answer?
Could you address those?
Could you answer? And I go, I most certainly can, because he got that information from articles that he assigned me to write. So, point by point, when I was 19, I was arrested for telling a cop at a traffic stop that my name, when he asked me for my name, I said Abraham Lincoln. So, I got in trouble for that. And probation for 18 months for lying to a cop, which I didn't even know that it was against the law. But again, now you live and you learn. And then, of course, I did a whole Ozzy Confidential, my podcast for Ozzy on my, having been a bodybuilder, eventually steroids come to play like they did for Arnold Schwarzenegger and The Rock and, half of the athletes.
Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah, exactly. So none of this should have been a surprise, but the fact that he went there and then somebody else contacted me from a pretty big publication in LA and said, you know what he's saying about you now? I go, what's that? He said, he's saying that you're just an MMA fighter who he pulled into publishing. I go, really? What about all those awards I got, from my publications in the past? I guess that those weren't fighting awards, but, so I think there's a lot of flailing. I think there's a desperation play. I think there's a large panic, and I think he's going back to what he knows, and it almost maybe would have worked. He, with Bill Cosby, with O.J. Simpson, with Clarence Thomas, is one of these cats that suddenly becomes black. Oh, and he's going on Charlemagne the God's show, trying to bro down. And then, of course, 25 minutes in or however many minutes in, it's revealed that, Charlemagne is an investor. And then asks a great question about how might investors get
how they get their money back. I remember that. I wanted to quote tweet that and be like, yo, spoiler alert, Charlemagne, you're not getting your money back.
You're not. Those work one way, my friend. Or there's a band called Space that I loved so much, and a British band, and they had this great song. I didn't lose your money. Your money just lost you.
That's beautiful. Bilal, I know you had a couple.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing this, man. I mean, the only thing I'm thinking about when I've read through the original New York Times piece and then your piece after was just like, this wasn't like a 1-year thing, right? Like this was going on for some time. I don't know how many years you were there, but I'm just curious to understand.
9 years.
9 years. Okay, so you're the person to ask. I'm curious, like, at what point did you start to think, like, the numbers that they're scribbling on the whiteboard or in the pitch deck that's going out to investors or whoever were fabricated or exaggerated? And like, I'm just curious, like, how that started happening over time.
I mean, look, like I said, I stayed in California because of music. I've been doing music since 1980 or 81. This is 1980. And it was just a really simple calculation. Like, NARIS, the music industry, the people that give you the Grammys, they're kind of a little bit shady, but they, if you had a platinum record, that means used to mean that you sold 1 million, and they've kind of changed it and they mixed around, but let's just go with that a bit. So anybody who sold 1 million records is called a platinum artist, right? I could give you a list of 10 platinum artists, and it might not be to your musical taste, but I'd venture a guess that not a single one of you wouldn't know somebody on that list, right? If not actually own the record somehow, So that would be 10 platinum artists, 10 million brain impressions, and we all know who they are. Justin Bieber, the Taylor Swift, these
Drizzy Drake.
All right, exactly. Flo Rida. These are people who we know, right? Take 5 times that, not just 10. Take not just 20, 30, 40. Take 50 million, right? How is it possible that 4 years in, that when I'm making a call to interview a subject about something, the phone conversations are like, no, this is Eugene. Eugene Robinson. Eugene S. Robinson, not the guy from the Washington Post. Yeah, no, I'm calling from Ozzy Media. We're a digital news publication from Mountain View, California, that's funded by the Republic. How is it 5 years that I would not have immediate identification with 50 million people embracing the product? Come on. It started to smell to me. That's how long it took for me to spell.
4 or 5 years, you're still calling people and brain.
Keep in mind, I'm working also crazy hours. Right. Dealing with, an interpersonal situation with Carlos that is unprecedented for me. Like I said on my podcast, The Show Stomper, the relationship that he and I had together, there is no man alive on the planet that I've let talk to me the way he's talked to me and fundamentally relate to me the way he's related to me. No boss, no living adult male who, but, at sometimes you kind of think, what is that, the great line from Clockwork Orange about this is the real tragic and weepy portion of the tale. I kind of figured, you know what? Everybody's got to eat a little bit of shit in life. This is my time. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. You know, I was going through a divorce, you know, I was still doing good work that I liked. I got to do good work that I like, as long as it didn't threaten, you know, this Carlos overriding trajectory of being Carlos the star. You could pretty much do stuff that you wanted. So there were reasons to stay.
There's this perception of this reality distortion field that he was trying to project, right? But I mean, how far away was it from like an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, who actually could bend the universe, materially, and like create enough of a field to bring something into existence?
Well, you know, my relationships with Steve Jobs, I worked at Apple, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, and were pretty convivial. I liked him. The only boss I've had that I would describe as inspirational was Andy Grove at Intel.
Okay.
Worked pretty closely with him. My bass player was the number 6 guy hired at Tesla.
Okay.
And remembers when Marty Eberhart was the CEO before he kind of moved on. And at first, you know, he worked with Musk. He said, you know, he didn't like Musk at first, but then he he didn't say enjoy him ever, came to understand him. But my understanding of Carlos Watson didn't cause me to enjoy him anymore. And there's something that people are missing. And that's what I tried to, with the Substack and tried to get across, that, you know, let's not skip by the fact that I'm African-American and the worst boss I had was African-American. And indeed, a number of days ago, maybe 6 days ago, the last tranche of Aussie employees had a meeting, and they all went around the room and said, if Carlos has never screamed at you, could you please raise your hand? And that everybody who raised their hand was white. You know, I mean, I didn't make them raise their hand. You know, that's just what they observed, and they raised their hand. So there may have been, he was good at one thing, and I would say that was the whip. Early days, maybe you would call it inspirational, in the sense that he had a vision of something really cool that you could just buy into. But, you know, hewing to that really cool, making it happen, involved, you know, more blood, more sweat, and more tears than were really necessary, given where we're going. It makes more sense if you figure the job is to foist him on the American public. It makes less sense if it's about creating a lasting digital news media platform of value, right?
Jack, I know so Jack here is big into audience building and has a lot of thoughts. He's very involved in kind of the Web3 stuff. Jack, do you have any questions around any of that related to Eugene's experience?
I was actually just going to ask for, Eugene, thanks for sharing the story, man. It's amazing. I was just going to ask about your view on media at large, like how you imagine the media landscape changing from here, and the idea of like an individual as a platform, just your perspective on that outside of like an organization building up an individual into a platform, and like an individual on building a platform by themselves. Correct
me if I'm wrong. When you say something like that, I think of cats like Joe Rogan. You know, I think of, you know, these multi-million dollar and multi-million fan influencers, right? I mean, I feel all fairly certain that if Joe Rogan were to say tomorrow, like it's a derivation of that line from that Woody Allen movie Bananas, if he were to say, okay, everybody should be wearing their underwear on the outside of their pants, not on the inside of their pants, I have no doubt in my mind that you would hit the streets immediately after he said so, and that you would find people walking like, hey, man, this is the way. I get with it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in other words, it's an easily abused platform, but what's significant about it, and we've seen this in the case with Trump and how the whole COVID thing has gone down, and that we're really in a position of wanting fatherly stewardship. And anybody, I mean, keep in mind, I'm going to mention some names for you, and depending on how old you are, it'll either resonate with you to a certain degree or not. If I say something like, Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
That's the kind of, and I think fundamentally America just elected that. We, in this great search for father, we elected the next best thing in this instance, which was Grandfather Joe. We want somebody with the kind of stolid, phlegmatic, just kind of, not easily prone to certain types of excess. We want a dad, and we haven't had one of those really since, Nixon wasn't a dad, right? They had glimmers of that with Reagan, but he was more of a grandpa with the jelly beans and the slippers in office and forgetting stuff. Clinton wasn't a dad, George W. was the bruised son. So I think we're tonally in a place where we want somebody to fill that role, and we keep getting close, right? We keep getting close, but I think those are the people that we'd be willing to listen to. And I don't think those people are going to work fundamentally for a news organ at this point in time. Brian Williams had a certain amount of gravitas, then he was caught lying, right? Dan Rather had that kind of gravitas, and then he got his ass kicked in the
Bush incident.
The lobby, right?
Yeah.
So, that's what I think that's the medium that would allow us to communicate with large numbers of people from all varying demographics. But I don't think, it opens itself up to such, this is the thing. We're just disappointed with our fathers, right? You find you one guy, and then you find out the guy's picking up hookers before the game. You just, I don't know. There's just something about, I think it's probably a product of masculinity in crisis. Because there are plenty of women who manage to hold that mantle and do a great job at it, right? I'm not a super big fan of somebody like Oprah, but seems like she knows what she's doing, But America in general is not hungering for more mothering. I think they're hungering for fathering, and I think that's a way to, I'm sorry to drag things back to fighting, but at first I started as a hater, and now I'm completely like 100%. Like Jake and Logan Paul, what they're doing for MMA fighters is pretty phenomenal in their constant and continual attempts to run at Dana White about fighter pay, which I think is a really big, significant labor issue that I've been paying attention to if we're talking about news. And these guys were gardening with their father's gardening business, 5 years ago. And so they've got a platform, they realize a certain amount of responsibility, and they're using the audience that they've already built to attain some sort of political ends. It could be just self-enrichment in the end. I don't know. But and I don't find them fatherly at all, but they're doing things that we wish that somebody, a father would do. I don't want to hear some guy just gets killed at bare knuckle boxing, and then you find out how much he was getting paid for that bare knuckle boxing match, and it just makes you feel dirty. Fair enough. UFC guys. So yeah, I think that's it. There's a great potential for really cool things to happen in that space. And then, and then there's a great potential for abuse. I would like to, in a very Nietzschean sense, get at least America past that hunger. Like having a very personal sense, Last time I cared what my father did or said or thought about, I must have been 20. So.
Fair enough. Do you mind if I do a super quick rapid fire? I know we're coming up on the time there. You mentioned MMA a couple times. Who's the greatest MMA fighter ever?
I'm going to have to go with John Jones. Legal problems or not, I need to just put that in some sort of context. John Jones had legal problems in the most recent spate of legal problems in Las Vegas. He's also been, hammer and tongs at it with Dana White over fighter pay. Coincidence or not? I don't know. Dana still seems to be in the pocket of Conor McGregor, a multiple accused rapist, but who am I? I'm just a viewer.
Fair enough. Second and last one for me was you mentioned Andy Grove a couple of times, and he is a legend in the Valley for how he turned around Intel and the only paranoid survive. So what was kind of Andy Grove's superpower, and what's kind of your memory of him?
I love that guy. I actually was very sad when he died, and he and I maintained a connection post Intel. He was just really smart, man. He was just really smart and funny, and amazingly enough, despite only the paranoid survive, he was a kind man. Hard and a taskmaster. And I wouldn't say the same about Steve Jobs. I didn't find Steve Jobs particularly kind. And nobody would have said that. But Andy was, the gruff exterior. He was, the first time I met him, I was editor-in-chief of the Intel's corporate publication. And he walked by my cubicle and I see him. And he walks by again. And he looks in and he walks by a third time. And I yes. He's like, are you Eugene Robinson? And I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, I think he was surprised at the whole African-American thing. And he took the issue, the first issue I had done for them, and he could clearly tell something amazing was happening. And he threw it on my desk and he had a term paper, graded it. He said, B. He gave me a B on my first issue. He said, good job, keep it up.
That's amazing.
How many would give a shit? He was like, hey, I need to do a press conference with Jeremy at 4 a.m. Can you do it? I go, yeah. He goes, well, when you get back, I go, get back. I'm not even going to go home. It doesn't make any sense. I'll just keep working till you're here. I'll come down to your cubicle. So it was just, to be able to spend time with him. It was pretty nice and cool. I liked it. Out of the people I've worked for, I've had other bosses that I liked, as much, but none that you would have heard of. But he was great.
I love that. You guys have anything more? That was amazing, man.
No, that was amazing, man. You've brought the energy, man. I really appreciate
that
time, man.
A podcast myself, so it's like
yeah. Where can we send people? Where can we send people?
It's the Eugene S. Robinson Show Stomper. I've got 180 versions of it out there. So
amazing.
Yeah, when you're in New York, let us know, man. We're gonna have to hang out. I can tell.
You're gonna be
a fun guy to hang out with, man. So I'm looking for when you're back in Brooklyn. Let us know.
Yeah, we'll get together. We'll do something. Nothing legal.
I'll start recording right now.
Cut.
All right, man. Thanks, Eugene, for joining.
Yeah, appreciate it, Eugene. Thank you.
Eugene, thank you so much, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.